I compared Nolan to Stanley Kubrick for his ability to attract box office success while also being a critical darling. It's allowed him to maintain the constant support of major film studios throughout most of his career. Now, normally I would say that this and this alone was the only connection between Nolan and Kubrick, but watching Dunkirk has made me wonder if Nolan might have more in common with Kubrick than I first thought. For one thing, Dunkirk is a visual masterpiece. Nolan is arguably the most famous filmmaker who still won't work with Netflix or with television and continues to shoot his movies with film rather than digital cameras. Just like Stanley Kubrick, he makes movies that demand to be seen in the cinema for the full effect. And so we're given a grandiose movie that just tries to capture the scope of the Dunkirk retreat, as well as the horrors that came with it. This might very well be the closest thing to a horror film that Nolan has ever made. While there's not a drop of blood to be seen, we see men drown, disappear into explosions, and in one case, we see them burned alive. The Germans are rarely seen, and their planes inspire terror. The soundtrack is a ticking clock at times and a racing heartbeat at others. Watching this in IMAX, the sudden shriek of the bombers or the blast of gunfire jolted me as much as it did the characters of the film. When it comes to the story, the film covers 3 theaters of Dunkirk: the land, the sea, and the air. The events on land cover 1 week in time, the events at sea cover 1 day in time, and the events in the air cover 1 hour in time. Now, he does explain this to us at the beginning, but even for a Chris Nolan film, the editing process is confusing. In one scene, we get rapid cuts between the characters in the air, in the water, and the characters from the land who are now in the water, and it jumps minutes, even seconds, back and forth between 2 different timelines. Also, and this is something that I have heard about Kubrick's movies, the characters are playing second fiddle to the visual effects and the story events. Most of the young soldier characters, sadly, at least for me, were completely unmemorable and indistinguishable from each other. And while their actions distinguished themselves in theory, not being able to really recognize who does what, it just sadly undermined the effort. The only ones I recognized were the people played by Kenneth Branagh, Tom Hardy, Cillian Murphy, and Mark Rylance. But even they get saddled with one-note characters. Murphy is the shell-shocked soldier, Branagh is the officer trying to keep calm under pressure, Rylance is the noble civilian going into danger in the name of doing the right thing, and Hardy is a heroic pilot who gives his all to protect his fellow countrymen. Now, while the horror aspects of war are played up in this film, it's worth noting that Nolan is still a patriotic Brit. And I'm not just saying that, he's been talking about it in his interviews. I say all that because for Nolan, and for Britain in general, the disaster at Dunkirk was a low point. A really low point. But the heroism displayed by ordinary people has been glorified by historians and storytellers pretty much even at the time of it happening. And in many moments of the film, we are meant to feel some of that heroism through the actions of people who sailed into a dangerous war zone to save as many stranded soldiers as they could. Sadly, despite the high notes of this movie, Dunkirk might be one of the more mixed films in Nolan's career. He's able to provide a great atmosphere, and he does a phenomenal job showing how different people react to disasters, but on the downside, there's not that many characters who stand out as three-dimensional. Now, if you don't need any such characters in a movie, then more power to you. And regardless of any flaws, Dunkirk is a spectacle. If you're going to go out to the cinema and watch some movies this summer, Dunkirk should be one of them.